Sophia sighed as she tightened the black bow tie of her server's uniform, staring at her tired reflection in the staff bathroom mirror. Dark circles had formed under her eyes from too many late nights practicing piano after double shifts. At 28, this wasn't where she had imagined herself. 5 minutes until briefing, everyone, called out the catering manager from the hallway. Sophia splashed cold water on her face, trying to wake herself up. Tonight was a big event at the Rothwell estate, the kind where a single champagne flute cost more than what she made in a day. The staff room buzzed with activity as servers adjusted their uniforms and checked their appearance. Sophia grabbed her serving tray and notepad, tucking a few extra pens into her pocket. She'd learned the hard way that wealthy guests often borrowed pens and never returned them. "Hey, didn't you have an audition today?" whispered May, another server who had become a friend over the past few months. "How did it go?" Sophia's shoulders dropped slightly. "Same old story. They said I was technically perfect but lacking something special. Whatever that means." She tried to keep the disappointment from her voice, but it crept in anyway. "That's their loss." May squeezed her arm supportively. "Anyone who's heard you play knows you're amazing." The memory of the audition stung. Sophia had graduated top of her class from the city's most prestigious music conservatory 4 years ago. Her professors had predicted a bright future, concert halls, recording contracts, maybe even international tours. Reality had turned out differently. Instead of performing on stages, she memorized wine lists and practiced keeping her tray steady while navigating crowded rooms. "All right, everyone gather round," called Mr. Chen, the catering director. "Tonight is the annual Rothwell Charity Gala. The guest list includes the mayor, 3 state senators, and at least a dozen CEOs. Everything must be perfect." Sophia half listened to the familiar instructions while mentally going through the piece she'd played at the audition. Where had she gone wrong? She'd practiced that Chopin nocturne hundreds of times. "Martinez." Mr. Chen's sharp voice pulled her back to reality. "Are you with us?" "Yes, sir. Sorry." She straightened up immediately. "As I was saying, the white wines should be served at exactly 48 degrees, and remember, become invisible when not needed. These people aren't here to chat with the help." Sophia nodded, swallowing the retort that formed in her throat. 40 years of intensive musical training, countless competition awards, and here she was, being instructed to become invisible. As the servers lined up to enter the main hall, Sophia caught a glimpse through the doorway. The Rothwell Estate's ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables decorated with elaborate flower arrangements. A magnificent grand piano sat on a small stage in the corner. A Steinway, she noted immediately. Her fingers itched just looking at it. "That's for Julian Kent," whispered May, noticing where Sophia was looking. "I heard he's being paid $20,000 just to play during dinner." Sophia's heart sank a little further. $20,000 for one evening. She'd auditioned for a position that paid $30,000 for an entire year. As they entered the hall, trays of champagne balanced carefully, Sophia's gaze kept drifting to the piano. When was the last time she played on an instrument that fine? Probably not since graduation. "Keep moving," hissed the floor supervisor. "Smile and circulate." Sophia pasted on her professional smile and moved through the crowd, offering champagne to guests who barely glanced her way. She overheard snippets of conversations about vacation homes, stock portfolios, and private schools. A life so different from her tiny apartment with the second-hand, upright piano that her parents had scraped together money to buy when she was 12. The piano that had been her escape, her joy, her dream. As the evening progressed, Sophia did as she was trained, anticipated needs, removed empty glasses, remained efficient and unobtrusive. But every time she passed near the piano, she felt a pull like a physical force. Little did she know that in just a few hours, that magnificent Steinway would change everything. The kitchen of the Rothwell estate was a battlefield of organized chaos. Chefs shouted orders as steam billowed from pots, and the sharp clang of metal utensils filled the air. Sophia weaved between rushing kitchen staff, careful not to bump into anyone carrying hot dishes or expensive ingredients. "Servers, line up for the first course," called Mr. Chen, clapping his hands sharply. The catering team assembled quickly, forming 2 neat rows. Remember, we serve from the left, clear from the right. The first course is the truffle and mushroom soup with gold leaf garnish. Sophia balanced 4 soup bowls on her tray, the warmth seeping through to her fingers. Her arms were used to this weight now, muscles trained from years of carrying heavy trays. Still, she moved carefully. These bowls cost more than she made in a day. "Just heard the boss lady is freaking out," whispered me as they waited by the kitchen doors. "Apparently the famous pianist is stuck at the airport." Sophia's ears perked up. "Julian Kent? He's not here yet." "Flight delays. They're hoping he'll make it for the main course, but who knows?" The double doors swung open and Sophia stepped into the ballroom. The lighting had dimmed, creating an intimate atmosphere despite the room's size. 300 guests in designer clothes sat at 30 round tables, their jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. Sophia moved smoothly between tables, placing soup bowls in front of guests who continued their conversations without acknowledging her. Years ago, this would have bothered her, being invisible despite being right next to someone. Now she was used to it. Being a good server meant disappearing into the background. As she served the last bowl at her assigned table, she overheard a conversation that made her slow her pace. "Complete disaster if Kent doesn't arrive," said an older man in a tuxedo. "Eleanor has been planning this for months." "The whole point of these events is the entertainment," replied his companion, a woman dripping in diamonds. "Nobody comes just for the food, no matter how good it is." Sophia glanced toward the small stage where the grand piano waited, gleaming under the spotlight. No musician in sight. She remembered an article she'd read about Julian Kent, world famous, played for royalty and presidents, commanded fees that most musicians could only dream of. And now he was the missing centerpiece of tonight's gala. Back in the kitchen, the pressure was mounting. The event coordinator, a tall woman named Vivian with a perpetually worried expression, was having an intense conversation with Mr. Chen. "The main course needs to be timed with the performance," Vivian insisted, gripping her clipboard tightly. Mrs. Rothwell specifically wanted music during the donation appeals. People give more when they're emotionally moved. Mr. Chen nodded grimly. "We can delay the main course by 15 minutes, but the fish won't hold well beyond that." Sophia pretended to reorganize her serving tray, listening intently. "I've called the airport 3 times, Vivian continued, her voice rising slightly. "The latest update is that all flights are delayed by at least 2 hours due to weather. Kent's plane hasn't even left Chicago." "Is there a backup plan?" Mr. Chen asked. Vivian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "For replacing one of the most famous pianists in the country on 2 hours' notice? No, there's no backup plan." Sophia's heart raced as she returned to the ballroom for the salad course. The guests seemed oblivious to the crisis unfolding behind the scenes, but she noticed Mrs. Rothwell at the main table, her smile fixed, but her eyes darting frequently to the empty piano. Mrs. Rothwell was known for her charity work. This annual gala raised millions for children's education programs. Sophia had read that the woman had grown up poor herself before marrying into wealth, and now dedicated her life to giving others opportunities she never had. As Sophia served the delicate salads topped with edible flowers, she found herself looking at the piano again and again. In her mind, she could hear the pieces she'd practiced just yesterday: Bach, Chopin, even some modern pieces she'd arranged herself. The thought that formed in her mind was crazy, absolutely crazy. She was here to serve food, not to perform. She would lose her job. She might even be sued for disrupting such a high-profile event. But as she watched Mrs. Rothwell's increasingly anxious glances toward the empty stage, Sophia felt something stir inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Perhaps it was courage, or perhaps it was simply the recognition of an opportunity that might never come again. Sophia nearly collided with Vivian as she pushed through the kitchen doors, arms loaded with empty salad plates. The event coordinator was on her phone, face flushed with stress. "No, you don't understand," Vivian was saying, her voice tense. "I need confirmation now. The entire evening is planned around." She stopped abruptly, pulling the phone from her ear to stare at the screen. "He hung up on me," she whispered in disbelief. Mr. Chen approached cautiously. "Any news?" Vivian shook her head, looking close to tears. "It's worse than we thought. Julian Kent's flight isn't just delayed, it's cancelled completely. Severe thunderstorms over Chicago. He's not coming at all. The kitchen fell silent. Even the chefs paused their work. Everyone understood what this meant for the event. Mrs. Rothwell needs to be told, Vivian said, straightening her blazer and visibly collecting herself. The main course will proceed without music. We'll figure something out for the donation appeal. Sophia watched Vivian march toward the ballroom, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Through the swinging doors, Sophia caught glimpses of the glittering crowd, laughing and chatting, completely unaware of the crisis. The kitchen erupted back into motion, but Sophia stood still, her mind racing. She thought of her tiny apartment with its second-hand, upright piano. She thought of the countless hours she'd spent practicing, believing that someday it would lead to something. She thought of the audition earlier that day, another rejection to add to her growing collection. And then she thought of the gleaming Steinway on the stage, sitting empty. Earth to Sophia. May waved a hand in front of her face. We need to prepare for the main course service. Are you okay? Sophia blinked. Yes, sorry. Just thinking. About the pianist drama. Not our problem, thankfully. Can you imagine the pressure? All those rich people staring at you, expecting perfection. Sophia didn't respond, instead watching as Vivian returned to the kitchen. The coordinator looked even more stressed than before, if that was possible. She's devastated, Vivian announced to Mr. Chen. This gala raises most of their annual funding. The music was supposed to set the mood for the big donation moment. Without it, she trailed off, then took a deep breath. Anyway, we serve the main course in 10 minutes. She wants everyone to proceed as planned. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. Before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward. I can play, she said, her voice smaller than she intended. Vivian barely glanced at her. What? Sophia cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. I can play the piano. I'm trained. Classically trained, I mean. Now Vivian turned to look at her fully, eyes narrowing. Is this a joke? No, I studied at the City Conservatory. I graduated 4 years ago. I've been playing since I was 6. Mr. Chen frowned. Sophia, this isn't the time for. I'm serious, Sophia interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. I know it sounds crazy, but I can play. Well enough for tonight. Vivian gave a short, humorless laugh. We need a professional, not a server who dabbles in piano. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. I am a professional, or I was trained to be one anyway. I can prove it. How exactly would you do that? Vivian asked, her tone making it clear she expected no satisfactory answer. Let me play for you. Right now. Just for a minute. The kitchen had gone quiet again, everyone watching the exchange. Mr. Chen looked concerned, probably worried about losing a server mid-service. Mi's eyes were wide with surprise. This is ridiculous, Vivian said, turning away. We have a crisis to manage. What's the harm in hearing her play? Came a new voice. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Rothwell standing in the doorway, elegant in her floor-length navy gown. Sophia hadn't noticed her enter the kitchen. Mrs. Rothwell, Vivian began. I heard everything, Mrs. Rothwell said, her gaze settling on Sophia. You're offering to replace Julian Kent. Sophia swallowed hard. Put that way, it sounded impossible, even to her own ears. Julian Kent was world famous. She was nobody. But she lifted her chin and met Mrs. Rothwell's eyes. I'm offering to play music for your guests while they eat and during your donation appeal. It won't be Julian Kent, but it will be better than silence. Mrs. Rothwell studied her for a long moment. Sophia could feel everyone watching, could sense Mr. Chen's disapproval and May's shock. All right, Mrs. Rothwell finally said, show me what you can do. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia had asked for this chance, and now it was hers, for better or worse. Sophia followed Mrs. Rothwell through a side door, her heart beating so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. They entered a small sitting room just off the main ballroom. A baby grand piano stood in the corner, not as magnificent as the Steinway on stage, but still a beautiful instrument. This was my mother's piano, Mrs. Rothwell said, running her hand along its polished surface. I learned to play on it as a child, though I never had your formal training. Sophia stood awkwardly in her server's uniform, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look. Vivian hovered near the doorway, arms crossed and expression doubtful. Mr. Chen had stayed behind to manage the kitchen, but he'd given Sophia a warning look as she left. "Please," Mrs. Rothwell gestured to the piano bench, "show me what you can do." Sophia sat down, adjusting the bench height out of habit. The keys felt cool beneath her fingertips as she rested her hands in position. For a moment, her mind went blank. What should she play? Something impressive and technical to prove her skills? Or something emotional that would show why music mattered for tonight's event? She closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath, and began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The piece started softly, delicately, like a gentle conversation. Sophia let herself sink into the music, forgetting for a moment where she was and why. Her fingers found the keys from memory, muscle memory built from thousands of hours of practice. As the piece built, she added the emotion she'd been holding back all day, the disappointment of another failed audition, the frustration of serving people who didn't seat her, the dream that refused to die despite all evidence that it should. The music swelled and receded, telling a story of longing and hope. When she finished, the room was silent. Sophia kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up. That was... Mrs. Rothwell's voice sounded strange, causing Sophia to finally raise her head. The older woman's eyes were shining with unshed tears. That was beautiful. Vivian stepped forward, her skepticism replaced by surprise. "You weren't exaggerating about your training. Do you know any contemporary pieces?" Mrs. Rothwell asked. "Something our guests might recognize." Sophia nodded. "I arranged some popular songs for piano. I like to mix classical techniques with modern melodies." Without waiting for permission, she began playing her arrangement of a well-known pop ballad that had been everywhere last summer. She'd spent weeks working out how to preserve the song's catchy melody while adding classical flourishes that made it uniquely hers. Mrs. Rothwell's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, I love this song." Sophia smiled as she played, adding a complicated run that transitioned into the chorus. When she finished, she looked up expectantly. Mrs. Rothwell turned to Vivian. "Call my daughter and ask her to bring down the blue gown, the simpler one. It should fit." She looked questioningly at Sophia. "I think so," Sophia replied, understanding dawning on her. "Mrs. Rothwell, are you sure about this? These people are expecting Julian Kent." "These people are expecting to be entertained while they eat an expensive meal and then feel good about donating to a worthy cause," Mrs. Rothwell said firmly. "You can provide that." Vivian still looked concerned. "The program has Mr. Kent's name printed on it. People will notice. Then we'll tell them the truth, that we had a last-minute substitution. Sophia, you have 15 minutes while we serve the main course. Can you put together a 30-minute program? Nothing too complicated. Background music for dining, then something more emotional during the donation appeal." Sophia's mind raced through her repertoire. "Yes, I can do that." "Good." Mrs. Rothwell smiled. "Vivian will introduce you. What's your full name?" "Sophia Martinez." Mrs. Rothwell nodded. "Perfect." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Sophia, play like you just did for us, like you mean every note. That's what these people need to hear tonight." As they returned to the hallway, May was waiting with wide eyes. "What happened?" "Are you in trouble?" Sophia shook her head, still not quite believing it herself. "They want me to play, instead of Julian Kent." "What? Fats." May broke off as Mrs. Rothwell's daughter arrived with a blue gown draped carefully over her arm. "Serve it to performer in 15 minutes," Sophia said with a nervous laugh. "I must be dreaming." But the weight of the silk gown in her arms felt very real, as did the butterflies in her stomach. In 15 minutes, she would walk onto that stage as a different person entirely. All those years of practice, all those dreams she'd refused to let go of, it had led to this moment, this chance. A chance she hadn't seen coming on a night that had started like any other. Sophia stared at her reflection in the small bathroom mirror, barely recognizing herself. The blue gown, a simple but elegant design, fit better than she could have hoped. The silky fabric shimmered under the light, making her feel like she'd stepped into someone else's life. "Hold still," said May, who had volunteered to help with Sophia's transformation. She carefully pinned Sophia's dark hair into a simple updo, her fingers working quickly. "I can't believe this is happening. Yesterday you were complaining about your sore feet from double shifts, and now you're about to perform for the richest people in the city." "I think I might throw up," Sophia admitted, pressing a hand to her stomach. "Don't you dare," May warned, securing another hairpin. "Not in this borrowed gown that probably costs more than our yearly salary combined." A soft knock on the door made them both jump. "5 minutes," called Vivian's voice, sounding slightly less stressed than before. "Mrs. Rothwell is about to announce the change in program." Sophia took a deep breath, meeting her own eyes in the mirror. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," May said firmly, turning Sophia away from the mirror to face her. "You've been preparing for this your whole life. All those hours practicing, all those lessons and competitions, it was for this moment. But these people are expecting Julian Kent. He plays for presidents and royalty. And tonight they get Sophia Martinez instead." May squeezed her shoulders. "Show them what they've been missing." Sophia nodded, trying to believe it. She slipped her feet into the borrowed shoes, also a surprisingly good fit, and followed May out of the bathroom. The hallway outside the ballroom was quiet, but Sophia could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices through the doors. Waiters hurried past with trays of the main course. One of them, a guy named Lewis who had started the same week as Sophia, did a double take when he saw her. "Sophia, what's going on? Why are you dressed like that?" Before she could answer, Vivian appeared, looking Sophia up and down with an approving nod. "Not bad," she said. "Mrs. Rothwell is explaining the situation now. When I open these doors, you'll walk straight to the stage. Don't rush, but don't dawdle either. Can you remember that?" Sophia nodded, though her mind felt foggy with nerves. "Good luck," May whispered, giving her hand a quick squeeze before returning to her serving duties. Through the crack in the door, Sophia could see Mrs. Rothwell standing at the front of the room, microphone in hand. "Unfortunate circumstances beyond anyone's control," Mrs. Rothwell was saying. "However, I believe everything happens for a reason, and tonight we have the unexpected pleasure of discovering new talent. Please welcome to the stage Ms. Sophia Martinez." Vivian pushed the doors open, and suddenly all eyes in the room turned towards Sophia. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, and for a second she froze. Her legs felt like jelly, and the distance to the stage seemed impossibly long. Then somehow she was moving forward. The room fell silent except for the soft rustle of her gown and the click of her borrowed heels against the marble floor. As her eyes adjusted to the light, she began to make out faces in the crowd, some curious, some disappointed, some already turning back to their conversations, dismissing her before she played a single note. At one table, she recognized a woman she had served champagne to earlier. The woman did a double take, clearly trying to place where she'd seen Sophia before. At another table, someone whispered loudly, "Who is she? Never heard of her." Sophia kept her eyes forward, focused on the magnificent Steinway piano that awaited her. As she reached the stage, a hand appeared to help her up the steps, Mrs. Rothwell, smiling encouragingly. "You look lovely," she whispered. "Now show them what music is supposed to sound like." The piano bench felt different from the one in the side room, higher, firmer. Sophia adjusted it slightly, buying herself a few seconds to collect her thoughts. The spotlight was hot on her skin, making the room beyond the stage fade into darkness. She could no longer see individual faces, just the shadowy outlines of the crowd. In a strange way, this calmed her. Without seeing their expressions, she could imagine she was alone, practicing in her apartment or in one of the practice rooms at the conservatory. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. For a moment, her mind went completely blank. What was she supposed to play first? She had planned a program, but now she couldn't remember a single piece. The silence stretched, becoming awkward. Someone coughed. Someone else clinked a glass. Then, as if her hands had minds of their own, they began to move. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room, soft, gentle, like moonlight on water. It wasn't what she had planned, but it felt right. As she played those familiar notes, something shifted inside her. The nerves faded, replaced by a sense of rightness, of belonging. This was who she was meant to be. This was where she belonged. And for the first time in years, Sophia Martinez felt truly, completely alive. The final notes of Clair de Lune hung in the air like a whisper. For a moment, the entire ballroom was silent, 300 people holding their breath together. Then came the applause, scattered at first, then growing stronger. Sophia opened her eyes, not realizing she had closed them. She looked out into the crowd, now able to make out faces beyond the spotlight's glare. People were sitting up straighter in their chairs, wine glasses and forks set aside. She had their attention now. Sophia smiled and began her second piece, transitioning smoothly into Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu. Her fingers flew across the keys in a flurry of notes, showing off her technical skills. The piece demanded everything she had: speed, precision, emotion. 4 years ago, she had played it for her final recital at the conservatory. Tonight, it felt like a reintroduction to the world. As she played, she caught glimpses of the servers moving through the room with the main course. Mi gave her a supple thumbs up while balancing a tray of plates. Mr. Chen stood at the back of the room, his usual stern expression replaced by something close to amazement. The wealthy diners were responding too. An older gentleman near the front had put down his fork entirely, watching Sophia's hands with keen interest. A woman at another table was swaying slightly to the music, eyes closed. Even the people who had been talking through her introduction were now listening. When she finished the Chopin piece, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Sophia felt a rush of confidence as she moved into her next selection, her own arrangement of a popular song that had been playing on radio stations all year. She had spent countless evenings working out how to translate its electronic beats into something that made sense on piano, adding classical flourishes that made it uniquely hers. A murmur of recognition spread through the crowd as people identified the melody. Some smiled in surprise at hearing the familiar tune in this elegant setting. Sophia allowed herself to enjoy their reaction, adding some improvisations that hadn't been part of her practice sessions. Between pieces, she occasionally glanced toward Mrs. Rothwell, who sat at the head table beaming with pride, as if Sophia were her own discovery, which in a way she was. The nervous event coordinator, Vivian, stood nearby looking relieved, checking something off on her clipboard. For her fourth piece, Sophia chose Liszt's Liebesstraum, a love song that built from tender beginnings to passionate heights. As she played, memories flooded back. The first time she touched a piano at 6 years old, her parents scraping together money for lessons despite their tight budget, the scholarship to music school that had seemed like a miracle, the countless hours of practice when her friends were out having fun. All of it had led here, to this moment, this piano, this audience. The main course was nearly finished now. Sophia knew it was almost time for the event's most important moment. The donation appeal. Mrs. Rothwell had specified something emotional for this part, something that would open hearts and, hopefully, wallets. Sophia paused, then began the piece she had been saving, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. She couldn't play the full orchestral parts, of course, but she had adapted it for solo piano, focusing on its most stirring moments. The music began quietly, building slowly with a sense of yearning and hope. As she played, Mrs. Rothwell rose and approached the microphone positioned near the piano. Sophia lowered the volume slightly, creating a perfect backdrop for speech without stopping her performance. The timing was seamless, as if they had rehearsed it for weeks instead of arranging it 15 minutes ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Rothwell began, her voice strong and clear over Sophia's playing. "Thank you for joining us tonight in support of the Children's Education Foundation." Sophia continued playing, matching her dynamics to Mrs. Rothwell's speech patterns instinctively. "Many of you know my story," Mrs. Rothwell continued. "I grew up with very little. My family couldn't afford books, much less music lessons or college tuition. But one person believed in me. A teacher who saw potential where others saw only poverty. Sophia built the music gradually, adding emotion as Mrs. Rothwell described the foundation's work, providing arts education and college scholarships to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Every child deserves the chance to discover their gifts," Mrs. Rothwell said, gesturing towards Sophia. "Sometimes those gifts remain hidden for years, waiting for an opportunity to shine." The music swelled as Mrs. Rothwell described specific children who had benefited from last year's donations. a boy from the city's poorest neighborhood, now attending an Ivy League university, a girl who had discovered a talent for science through a foundation-funded program. Around the room, Sophia could see people reaching for checkbooks, whispering to each other about donation amounts. The music was working its magic, opening hearts by bypassing logic and speaking directly to emotion. As Mrs. Rothwell described their fundraising goal for the evening, Sophia brought the music to its most powerful climax, filling the room with sound. She saw tears in some eyes, saw heads nodding, saw hands reaching for pens. And in that moment, Sophia understood something she had forgotten somewhere along her difficult journey. Music wasn't just about technical perfection or impressive performances. It was about connection, about moving people, about changing something in the world, even if just for a moment. Tonight, her music was doing exactly that. The final notes of Sophia's performance faded away, leaving a moment of perfect silence before the ballroom erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, their expensive jewelry catching the light as they clapped enthusiastically. Sophia stood from the piano bench and gave a small, slightly awkward bow, overwhelmed by the response. Mrs. Rothwell beamed as she returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sophia Martinez." The applause grew even louder. Someone in the back whistled. Sophia felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. As she stepped down from the stage, still slightly wobbly in the borrowed heels, people reached out to touch her arm, to congratulate her. "Extraordinary," said an older woman dripping in diamonds. "Where have you been hiding, my dear?" "She's been right here, serving our champagne all evening," replied her companion with a laugh. "We just didn't notice." Sophia smiled politely, not sure how to respond. It was strange being seen so suddenly after years of invisibility. She made her way across the room, accepting compliments in a daze, until she reached the kitchen doors where May was waiting, eyes wide with excitement. "That was incredible," May whispered, pulling Sophia into a quick hug. "Everyone's talking about you." Before Sophia could respond, Vivian appeared at her side, looking completely different from the stressed coordinator of an hour ago. "Mrs. Rothwell would like you to join her at the head table for dessert," she said. "As a guest, not as staffed," she added, as if Sophia might misunderstand. Sophia glanced at Mr. Chen, who stood nearby. "Is that okay?" To her surprise, he nodded with a hint of a smile. "I think we can spare you for the rest of the evening. You've certainly earned it." Dessert at the head table was a surreal experience. Sophia sat between Mrs. Rothwell and a well-known city official whose name she recognized from newspapers. They asked about her musical background, her training, her favorite composers. She answered their questions honestly, telling them about her 4 years at the conservatory, the competitions she'd won, and the disappointing reality she'd faced afterward. "The classical music world is so competitive," she explained, carefully cutting a piece of chocolate cake. "There are hundreds of pianists for every open position. After graduation, I couldn't find work performing. I needed to pay rent, so," she gestured at the servers moving around the room. "I started working for the catering company." "But you never stopped playing," Mrs. Rothwell said. It wasn't a question. Sophia shook her head. "I practice every day. Early mornings, late nights, whenever I can." "Passion like that doesn't fade," said an older gentleman across the table. He handed her a business card. "I'm on the board of the symphony orchestra. We should talk." By the time dessert was finished, Sophia had collected 5 business cards and promises of auditions, teaching opportunities, and private recital bookings. Her head was spinning. Was this really happening? As the evening wound down, guests began to leave, many stopping by the head table specifically to compliment Sophia's performance. One woman pressed a check into her hand. "For your first recording," she said with a wink. When the last guest had departed, Sophia found herself alone with Mrs. Rothwell in the emptying ballroom. The catering staff was busy cleaning up, giving them occasional curious glances. "I should help them," Sophia said, gesturing toward her co-workers. Mrs. Rothwell shook her head. "Not tonight. Tonight you're our guest of honor." She smiled warmly. "Do you know how much money we raised during your performance?" Sophia shook her head. "Over $3 million. That's nearly double our goal." She reached out and took Sophia's hand. "Your music touched people's hearts and opened their wallets. That's a rare gift." Sophia blinked back sudden tears. Thank you for giving me a chance. I still can't believe you let me play when you'd never even heard me before. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, Mrs. Rothwell said. When you told us you could play, there was something in your eyes, a certainty. I recognized it because I've felt it myself. It's knowing your purpose and just needing someone to give you a chance to fulfill it. She reached into her evening bag and pulled out a small card. This is my personal number. Call me on Monday. I'd like to discuss becoming your patron. Your patron. Every artist needs support at the beginning of their career. Someone to help with connections, performance opportunities, perhaps even a better piano than the one in your apartment. Mrs. Rothwell smiled at Sophia's surprised expression. Yes, I've been making inquiries. Your talent is too precious to waste serving canapes, my dear. Sophia clutched the card, speechless with gratitude. Now you should go change. Your friend has been hovering by the kitchen door for 10 minutes waiting for you. Sophia turned to see Mai pretending not to watch them. She laughed and stood up, carefully smoothing the borrowed blue gown. I'll return this tomorrow. Keep it, Mrs. Rothwell said. Consider it your first performance gown. 3 months later, Sophia stood backstage at the city's most prestigious concert hall, now wearing a gown she had chosen herself, deep red, with subtle beading that caught the light when she moved. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the sold-out audience settling into their seats. Her name was printed on the program in bold letters, Sophia Martinez, piano soloist. Her first professional concert. Her new beginning. In the front row sat Mrs. Rothwell, beaming with pride. Next to her was May, who had taken the night off from catering to attend. Even Mr. Chen had come, sitting stiffly in his suit several rows back. As Sophia waited for her cue to walk on stage, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The new apartment with space for a proper piano. The recording contract. The private students. The newspaper interviews asking about her overnight success. But she knew better. There was no such thing as overnight success, only years of preparation meeting a moment of opportunity. The stage manager gave her the signal. Sophia took a deep breath and walked out to face the audience that had come specifically to hear her play. As the applause washed over her, she smiled, thinking of all the invisible people in the world, waiting for their moment to shine. She sat at the gleaming concert grand piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. And then Sophia Martinez began to play.